This week, MPs in Parliament debated the ban of non-stun religious exemption animal slaughter, halal and kosher. And I'm going to go through some of the clips because it would be hilarious if it weren't so absurd that we had this many advocates for barbaric Islamic practices in the British government. So we've got here the transcript from Hansard that you can read through in your own time, but I'll go through some of the snippets, the lowlights, if you will, of the debate. It began with Liberal Democrat MP Jamie Stone insisting that the debate only confine its terms to animal welfare and not discuss whether or not one religion or another is legitimate or compatible with Britain. Now, we expect this from the woolly liberal pluralism of the Liberal Democrats, but this is actually a practice that is pursued by opponents of halal slaughter and other practices like the burqa and niqab or cousin marriage. It is usually argued on the grounds of utilitarian harm reduction versus liberal individualism. And that is the wrong way to argue. I would suggest that we do a bit of strategizing here as a sort of movement, right? The way that you can phrase this sort of thing is in terms of cultural preference and relationships. Because if you frame your argument against something like halal slaughter as an animal welfare issue, sort of abstract moral concern, then your enemies will turn around and say, well, you're a hypocrite because you're not a vegan and you still eat animals, and the ultimate cruelty is killing an animal. Therefore, you don't actually care about animal welfare. You just hate Muslims and Jews and you want to expel them from the country. Or if you frame it in terms of the challenge to liberal individualist norms for wearing the burqa or niqab, they will turn around and say, well, it's a woman's right to wear this. You're against religious freedom. Aren't you a hypocrite? You just hate Muslims and Jews. Instead, we can just say, this practice is not compatible with the way we'd like to do things in this country. For the burqa and niqab, we think that women are moral agents capable of equal dignity to that of men, and we do not think that a woman showing her skin invites sexual violence by a predatory man with low impulse control. It is not a woman's job to conceal her skin to prevent violence committed against her. It is actually the man's job to constrain his appetite, and that is a kind of civilizing force that allows men and women to get along and for people to walk the streets in relative peace. And for halal slaughter, we would say, as Rupert Lowe does in his speech, the relationship between a father and an animal should be paternalistic. They should not want to inflict unnecessary cruelty on the animal in the process of sacrificing and eating it, because meat eating is something that is ergonomic to human anthropology, especially in Northwest Europe. And so, if you want to conduct those practices, you're going to do it elsewhere. You're not going to do it here. We should ban imports on it because we don't want to support the practice. And if you are a Muslim or a Jew in the country and you are visiting the country, you're just going to have to be vegetarian for the time being. There are, of course, kosher and halal prepared options of other foods that are not slaughtered meat that you will eat while you are here, but otherwise abide by our custom or do not come. And there are plenty of other countries in the world that will not abide by our standards and our preferences that you can be in instead. The problem is, lots of people do not feel they have sufficient backbone to say that, because they get attacked by their adversaries in the media and by Muslims in the other parties, including the Labour Party and independent MPs. However, if you are prepared enough, you have nothing to fear, because the arguments by Muslim MPs in the Labour Party and in the Gaza-obsessed Independent Alliance cohort are patently absurd. And the perfect example of this is Yasmin Koreshi. Now, Yasmin Koreshi is a Pakistani immigrant who's a Labour MP who runs her own area like a little fiefdom. She's been there for sort of 10, 15 years. And she is previously an MP who has shouted down a Conservative MP for suggesting that there was a problem with the Pakistani grooming gangs. And she said that you are basically Islamophobic if you mention this, and that it's just a problem with men, just men, from nowhere in particular, of no belief in particular, never mind the fact that they shout Allahu Akbar when they're sentenced in Rotherham for these crimes. And if you are suggesting there's any sort of connective tissue between the way that Islam views women and the clannish morality of Mirpur Pakistanis, and the fact that they perpetrate these heinous crimes against English girls, well then you're just a racist. She says all of this, right? Easily disprovable on that issue. She then goes even more absurd during the halal slaughter debate to argue that because the butchers hug animals before they slit their throats and let them bleed to death, there's no problem.
Others who can talk more about the kosher practice, also accept that it is recognizing that you are taking a living being, and therefore you have to respect it. And in fact, the Islamic slaughtering, and I think it's the same with the Shechita method, is that the animal, when it's slaughtered, is actually held, embraced, so that if, for example, there's any stress, it is de-stressed. And Islamically, I know that all animals have to be vegetarian animals, effectively. So Muslims only eat basically lamb, cows, sheep and chicken, because they are considered to be grass-eating vegetarian animals and don't eat other animals. So again, eating healthy meat, but also protecting meat and the way it's slaughtered is important. And therefore, to say that this is somehow barbaric, that is wrong. But as I've said, to be honest, when I've looked at social media, when I've looked at GB News, and when I've looked at newspapers, this whole debate has been, oh, barbaric, let's get rid of halal meat, halal meat, halal meat. That's almost the mantra everybody has. Yet, 88% of it is pre-stunned anyway. So what I would say is that I'm grateful that the government has taken a sensible approach to this, and I do believe that halal meat should, as well as kosher meat, should be available in this country. I'm very happy that it should be labelled. I think that's very important, that there should be clear labelling. I don't think anybody has any problem with that, so people know what they are actually getting. But I think the practice, and there has been, although it's not been mentioned, there have been scientific studies which has carried out, which have said that actually the Jewish and the Islamic method of kosher is actually less painful to the animal because it's very minimum in time.
So just pure sophistry, right? Slitting an animal's throat while it's not been stunned, still aware, letting it bleed to death. Yeah, that's not solved by treating it like a Build-A-Bear and just holding it tightly. I think the cortisol of having your throat slit is slightly higher than that which is reduced by a hug. And the idea that, again, there are studies that show that slitting an animal's throat is actually way less painful than stunning them so they're unconscious and then putting a quick bolt in their brain. Yeah, you're lying. You're just lying. You're just making it up because you want to ensure that halal meat is still available because you want to grow the size of the Muslim population in this country. And this is why we are not arguing on the same moral foundations if we argue for harm reduction or animal welfare. We're just not in the same moral universe because they are using whatever language they can to make our moral sensibilities flexible and amenable to enabling the flourishing of their parallel civilization and their completely incompatible religious beliefs. And so we just have to say, you're right. We think halal slaughter is barbaric. It doesn't matter if you're saying, well, we've pre-stunned them because it's a lower dose of stunning, by the way. But it doesn't matter if you've pre-stunned them. What actually matters is halal slaughter is barbaric. It is not the way we do things in this country. And yes, Islam as a broader belief system is a problem in Britain. And we should just be saying it. We should just be forthright about it because the majority of people are looking for permission to express their concerns about it. And then, what was even more absurd is that Adnan Hussein and Ikbal Muhammad, Ikbal Muhammad, the man who stood up and defended cousin marriage in Parliament when Richard Holden and Nick Timothy brought forward a bill to prevent it, and Adnan Hussein, who said that to Rupert Lowe, well, if you just want the ability to offend Muslims, you're not for free speech. They're the same thing, by the way. They then said, of course, any policy passed to prevent no stun, throat-slitting slaughter is actually identical to the Nazis, because the Nazis did the same thing with the same justification.
I'm grateful to the honourable member putting forward his case passionately. Will the member agree that this isn't about animal welfare? We once saw Nazi Germany put forward into place, into law, similar policies. The justification then was to animal welfare, but in context, this was a thin pretext for anti-Semitism. The ban was part of a broader programme to marginalise and dehumanise Jewish people, stripping away their rights and religious freedoms. Will the member agree that a ban on this nature threatens to have similar effect on Britain's Muslim and Jewish communities?
I thank the honourable member for his intervention. We must drive our society from this place, to move away from divisive rhetoric and hurtful behaviours, racism, anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and any such attempts that bring these to the fore should be challenged, and communities should be protected.
So excuse me if I don't think that these chaps who make constant interventions on behalf of Gaza are all that bothered about anti-Semitism. I think that's a smokescreen, as the Muslim Brotherhood used when inventing the term Islamophobia. I think that's a smokescreen to associate criticism of Islam with third rails, especially after the atrocities of the Holocaust, that people do not want to touch because it is a reputation death sentence, and usually are associated with all sorts of kooky, conspiratorial, fevered imagination ravings, whereas criticisms of Islam, especially if you just read the texts associated with Islam, are perfectly rational and sensible and are not a phobia. And the idea, again, the juvenile insistence that everything we don't like is Adolf Hitler. I'm so bored of it now. I've got "you're literally Hitler" fatigue. No, it's not identical. It's not a subversive effort to expel all Jewish people from the country. It is saying that according to English custom, we do not like the way that kosher and halal slaughter treats animals. We do not regard Islam as compatible with the British way of life, and so we will prohibit the behaviours that we dislike, as is our right to do as the host majority with a distinct culture from yours, and you do not get to redefine our culture to include you, especially if you have nothing but contempt for our traditions and constantly accuse us of being racist and bigoted. And then, of course, Imran Khan, another member of the Independent Alliance, got up and said, while the petition in question makes no reference to halal or kosher slaughter, it has been welcomed in right-wing echo chambers as an opportunity to marginalise and discriminate against the Muslim and Jewish communities. Now, this is the same Imran Khan, by the way, who got up and said at a conference of Pakistanis lobbying for an airport in Mirpur, Pakistan, that the grooming gags is a false right-wing narrative that is done to sow division. So he is dismissing out of hand the well-documented abuse of white working-class girls by Pakistani Muslim men as a fiction. Meanwhile, he's accusing everyone else of veiled bigotry. This is blatant sophistry, and it is clearly just trying to pry open the vulnerabilities in Britain's secular liberal character, even though we have an official state religion, but it's not exactly taking as dominant a position in public life at the moment. It is trying to pry open those vulnerabilities to sneak in permissiveness of Islamic doctrine and allow that incompatible parallel civilization to flourish in our midst until such a time where, if these MPs were to reach a critical mass, Britain would become a Muslim country. And that is not desirable. I disagree with it entirely. And so the person we should look to frame these arguments is Rupert Lowe. And here's his full speech. And I'll play it and pause it where pertinent. But Rupert Lowe, as a farmer, got up and delivered the speech not on the grounds of abstract concerns about animal welfare, but as a farmer with a relationship to his animals and a sense of obligation to abide by English custom. And I think this is instructive as to how we should argue on issues like this, on issues like the burqa and the niqab, on issues like cousin marriage in future.
Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I accept this is a very sensitive debate, and we all get along fine in Parliament, so I hope you all accept what I'm saying as a genuine view from me. One of the greatest joys of being a farmer is raising livestock. You see them born, you feed them, you watch them grow, you care for them. And when their time comes, you want that end to be swift, calm, dignified and painless. Right now, today, all across the country in abattoirs, we're allowing vile practices that would turn the stomach of any decent person, all in the name of religious exemption. No bolt to the brain, no stunning, no anaesthetic, a blade, a deep crushing cut across the throat. The animal does not die instantly. It thrashes, it gasps, it panics. It feels everything. That's a minute of pure agony while the blood pours from its body. No sedation, no stunning, just raw terror and suffocation. As a farmer, I would rightly be prosecuted for treating our animals like that. But in the abattoir, it's legal under religious exemption. It's two-tier slaughter. Instead of an instant painless death, these poor beings are being put through the most unimaginable pain, all in the name of religion. This isn't farming, it's torture. And the British people have no idea that this is happening, because supermarkets don't label it, restaurants don't mention it, and schools don't highlight it. And politicians in these buildings are too terrified to mention it, out of fear of upsetting the religious minorities. I'm afraid I don't care. It's about animal welfare. Millions of Brits are eating halal meat against their will and without their knowledge, due to our deceitful labelling system. The two-tier regulatory arbitrage between our abattoirs and halal slaughterhouses means that there are economic factors fostering more widespread adoption of the cheaper option. That means halal meat is seeping into the food chain, and the consumer is unwittingly eating it. I will give way.
The honourable member mentions halal meat. Is the same position for kosher meat? Does he adopt the same position?
I do. I cover that at the end of my speech. Thank you for your intervention.
So I'm just going to pause there. Look at what Ayub Khan tried to do. He knows that anti-Semitism is a reputation third rail for anyone, especially after, again, the horrors of the Holocaust, for understandable reasons. And so he is trying to provoke Rupert Lowe into being caught in a contradiction of not wanting to offend Britain's settled Jewish communities for a few hundred years, versus addressing the barbarity inflicted upon animals in the name of halal and kosher slaughter. And he is trying to catch Lowe in a trap, whereas he does not care about kosher slaughter. He doesn't give one iota about religious freedoms. He cares about Islam. He cares about what benefits are conferred unto his ethnic in-group, the Ummah, and the protected status afforded to his religious beliefs and its associated practices. He doesn't give a damn about the consistency of Rupert Lowe's belief, and Rupert Lowe was unfazed by it. He didn't stutter, he didn't stammer, he didn't get caught in a lie. He applied the standard consistency. The only objection I have is when he said it's about animal welfare. I would say instead it is about how the English feel we should treat our animals, because we shouldn't be trying to justify our culture on abstract terms in order to either render ourselves impervious to the wholesale transformation by imported cultural practices or accommodate diversity. Instead, we should just be saying, this is our preference, this is our custom, this is our tradition, you are newcomers with wholly incompatible views of doing things, and you don't get a say over the people of this country and the way they feel about things.